Welcome back to another How to Succeed podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague at Sandler, and this is How to Succeed as a Woman in Business. I'm not going to talk about that, so we got a very special guest, Holly Hunt here. You can find her at hollybhunt.com. She's spent like over 17 years in telecom and tech. She's won Channel Manager of the Year awards before, and she's been a woman in business and in sales for even longer than that. So we're going to talk to her about how to succeed at that. This podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems, LLC, protected by U.S. copyright laws. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training. And don't forget, share this episode with somebody that you think needs to hear it. We're recording this a little bit early so that we can debut it on National Business Women's Day here, coming up on September 21st as well. So if you want to help celebrate women in business, share this episode as much as possible. We appreciate it. And leave a comment below. You can join the discussion anytime, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. It's Sandler or Sandler Worldwide on YouTube. All right, Holly, I think we are ready here. So tell me a little bit about your experience as a woman in business, and maybe what are some of the common myths or misconceptions that you think people aren't aware of?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here, especially that this aligns with the National Women in Business Day. So I'm honored to be a guest here. I've been in sales and sales leadership type roles in the tech space for almost 2 decades now, but I don't want to age myself even more. So we'll say around 17, 18 years now. But it can feel like an eternity some days. But what I do love is there's always something new going on, right? With technology, we're constantly there's constant change. There's constantly new things to see and new things evolving. So there's never a dull moment. So I enjoy being in this space. When it comes to what I've learned, definitely have learned a lot. I continue to learn. I feel like when you think you stopped learning or you know it all, then that's when you start, I feel like digressing, right? So always excited to grow, learn more, better myself. It's being a woman in business. I feel like the longer, maybe especially in the past few years, I've become more confident. I think in the first years, traditionally, especially in the telecommunications space, which is where I'm at, it is a male-dominated industry, so that can be a little daunting and a little overwhelming at times if you're the only female sitting at a table. Especially, I was also younger in some of those meetings as well. So I think I wasn't confident enough, and that can shine through just in how I spoke or the lack of speaking up, not being willing to speak up because I didn't want to seem that I didn't know what I was talking about. I wanted to be overly prepared before I spoke up. And as I've gotten older, I've learned, you know what, it's okay. Sometimes what you say, other people are thinking, and just being willing to put yourself out there and to speak up, to share ideas, to brainstorm is better than sitting back and waiting till you're fully ready. So I'd say taking risk has been one of probably the biggest takeaways I've had in my career to date. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and play it safe, but that's not where the fun's at, and that's not where the action is. Yeah. So being willing to take risk and, again, just kind of open yourself up to new opportunities.
I think that's a really good place to start. And it's interesting when I hear it from my perspective, I feel a lot of those things too when I'm young. So I wonder sometimes how much of it, and there are stats that say women don't ask for higher salaries or higher commissions and things. And that's one of the reasons for some of the pay gaps in certain professions and other things. So I think that's a great opening lesson. But I also think that, man, so many people struggle with imposter syndrome or not knowing, or when I'm young and I'm trying to go in and talk to a CEO about their business and stuff. It took me a while. It took me almost 10 years to kind of figure out that, like, about the time I turned 30, these business owners aren't living the world that I'm living in. I have expertise that they don't have, and that I can bring value even if they've been in the business 20, 30 years longer than me. And one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, because I think there's a misconception here with women too, specifically around the sales profession. They tend to, in the stats, not show up as much as men for wanting to be in the sales profession. Certainly not as many female sales leaders as well currently. But I kind of feel like this is a misconception that women tend to have skills that are better suited for sales and for management than men a lot of times. Do you agree with that statement? And what are your thoughts of maybe why women don't naturally feel comfortable in the sales profession or go after the sales profession?
I completely agree. Something I think growing up was when I thought about what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Like it was looking around at the people around me. Most of the, not that there's anything wrong with this, but most of the females I saw in my life were teachers or were in the traditionally female roles, marketing, maybe HR. There are roles that are more female oriented for whatever reason. I'm sure there's studies that tell us why. You didn't see, and I even think back to movies, Glengarry, Glenn Ross, Wolf of Wall Street. You don't see a ton of women, and I think it's perception. And so, as you know, growing up, it wasn't I want to be a sales leader in the technology space because how many women do you see doing that? So I think sometimes what you can't see, you don't know if it's attainable. So I kind of put it on myself to showing other women like this is an option for you. And it is something that women can excel in. To your point, I think the organization, I've been successful and found success. I'm very detail oriented, very organized. Sometimes I do traditionally, again, I'm generally speaking, but things that women tend to sometimes be better at. I know I found myself in one of my first sales leadership roles, managing all men who were all older than me in age. And that was a little intimidating, but I think they did have a lot of respect for me because I was willing to take the risk. I was willing to, put myself out there. And while I'd like to say fake it till you make it, I at least exuded the confidence. I may have not felt it, but sometimes just getting up and showing up and putting yourself out there. What does Woody Allen say? And you'll see I'll reference quotes often, but 80 or 90% of it's just showing up. But I put myself out there and said, you know what? What's the worst that could happen, right? And I think sometimes we always like to look at, well, what if I fail? And, what are people going to think of me? But when I really look at it, and am I going to be more disappointed in the failure, or maybe not, or taking a risk on something and not working out, or more disappointed that I never even tried and that I sat back thinking, what if? And so it's really how I've lived my life, how I've lived my career, and always looking for opportunities again to, I think, step into leadership roles. I've done individual contributor. And then again, when I've found success, I was approached. And I think sometimes it's also finding someone that feels confident and that is in you and in your abilities. I've been approached. My first role was someone saying, I think you can do this role. I know you're newer to the team, but I stepped into a position where my current manager was promoted. So there was an opening on the team. I never would have thrown my name in the hat, right? I never would have raised my hand and said, I want to apply, but someone above me said, I think you should. And so sometimes I would encourage leaders, or if you're in a position, to sometimes turn back and maybe encourage someone else that's more junior to apply for things. If that person hadn't, I can definitely say I never would have thought about it. But when he said it, he planted that seed. And I thought, well, if he thinks I can do it, why don't I? I should be my biggest cheerleader. I should have that confidence. And so I credit him with giving me that, boost of confidence to apply. And every time that I've had success, or I've gotten that promotion, or given an opportunity, it's just fueled, I feel like, the fire in me even more to be even more bold and to, apply for something else. So sometimes it's just getting started.
I love that. A ton of really great attitudes in there for everybody in business, but especially young women, that you do have to go for it. You do have to, believe in yourself to get those higher opportunities and to keep moving up. And I think also for other people, of, like you said, looking back and looking for people who are naturally good at it. The one question I wanted to ask you, because I think it comes up a lot in our attitude bucket, is sometimes I think women in business feel like they have to pretend to be men in business in order to fit in, when actually what we need is more of the feminine energy or characteristics to succeed, or that, really being yourself, whatever that means, is more powerful. Did you run into that at all? And have you seen that? What advice would you give for young women who wanted to be in sales, thinking either they need to, man up to be in the sales profession or sales management, versus leaning into their feminine side?
Great question. And absolutely, the first thing I was looking down was at my nails. I used to not want to paint my nails bright colors. I never wanted to stand out as almost wanted to dull the feminine energy, if you will. I wanted to just really be seen, not heard to an extent, right? Like I want to show that I can do their job. And for whatever reason, I guess that made me think that I needed to not be so feminine. And to your point, maybe not wear bright colors and not be me. And that was hard too to stifle that because I feel like I'm my best self when I'm my true self, and that was hard to think. You need to be someone else or you need to pretend like you're someone else or dull a maybe the best side of you just to fit in a societal mold is what I'll reference it as. And I think once, again, I think it was me looking up and seeing other women around me in even higher roles and in VP type level roles that weren't afraid to be themselves. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it. So I think that I'd want to, again, stress the importance of being that role model and setting that example out there for the younger generations and the people, that are coming up through the ranks behind us. Because they do. I've had people reach out to me and say, you've given me confidence because you've been yourself in this situation, or because you're not afraid to, be feminine and in a male dominated industry. And that stuck with me because that also I know was something I looked at, but now I try to also carry that torch forward, if you will, and know that the piercings or the that you may have, people that have or tattoos. I mean, that's always been such a taboo thing, right? I don't have any personally, but it was always like that was frowned upon. You need to be buttoned up and, no creative artistic approach. And I think fortunately the society is starting to change the perception on some of that it doesn't impact what your mind is and
Right.
what you're capable of, which is encouraging because people, when they're comfortable, I feel like can shine and be the best version of themselves.
I agree. Now, as we move to our behavior bucket here, these are our goals, plans, and actions. And I think a really great question here is, what do you think successful business women do that maybe men don't, or that younger women or women who aren't successful in business don't do?
So I don't know if this is exclusive to women. I know that for myself, for me it is, and then for some of the women I know personally in the similar industries, is the preparation and the planning. So there's different. I always like to look at the sphere of control and then the sphere of influence. So there's a lot of things that we can directly control, right? But timing, I feel like, is not one of those. We can
Mhm.
influence timing, but sometimes we have zero control over it. It's kind of that right time, right place. So when it comes to maybe putting yourself in the right position for a future opportunity or to be considered for, again, depending on where you're at in your career, an internship or for a promotion in your job, or to take on additional responsibilities to be able to prove yourself for an additional promotion, I think it's preparing ahead of time and knowing that when the time comes that you that's the one thing you're not able to control, but that you are prepared. So always being prepared, showing up each day as your best self. I'm such a big, and you'll see on my website, I'm such a big proponent of the first hour of the day and how that can impact the next 23. So I always, I won't say always, I try to strive to either it's this morning I went for a 3-mile run. And while I'm running, that's as much of a mental thing for me as it is physical. I'm able to work through problems, think through things, plan for the day. So whatever it may be, some people love to meditate. Some people love to, maybe just go for walks, spend time in prayer and yoga. There's a lot of different things that really just to get yourself in the right headspace. And I think for me, that's, again, probably not necessarily unique to women, but it's definitely worked for me just to really put myself in a good headspace and to really think through, where do you want to be? And, setting goals. I may want to be a VP one day, right? But let's break that down a little bit. It's great to set big, lofty goals, but what do you need to do to get there, right? And putting a plan together, not just setting a goal and shooting, throwing darts at the wall and hoping something sticks. Really putting together solid plans and what I like to call micro goals. So rather than saying, okay, I'm going to do this in 6 months, well, to get there in 6 months, what do you need to do in 3 months? What do you need to do in 1 month, 1 week, 1 day? When you approach it that way, first of all, it's not as daunting because you can really put together plans to get you there. So in 3 months, you've been working your way to that point. But it also feels more attainable. So it goes back to the, setting smart goals and going against that, making sure it fits each of the categories.
I love that. And it brings to mind another interesting question when I think about succeeding as a woman in business. You mentioned the personal schedule and how you start your mornings and stuff. And I think everybody is struggling with working from home. A lot of sales jobs are remote now, and that means sales management and everything else too. Do you think there are any differences or advice you would give for women? I think we hear a lot that they have to deal more with childcare situations or other things,
Mhm.
and some of those are changing too, typical stereotypes, which I think are great for both sexes. But any advice there on the timing and goals and action of the behaviors of keeping all of it? I think sometimes we put too much pressure that women have to do everything and be all of it in order to consider to be successful, or that choosing business over children or something is even a choice or one that you would have to make. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on this whole topic?
No, it is. It's something I've thought about a lot. I'm 39. I don't have children. I'm in a serious relationship, but not married either. So there's times that I've sat back and thought, did I sacrifice my personal for my success? Right. And early on, I know I went to a women's leadership conference, and there was a woman there that she's kind of, her mantra is balance is bullshit. And I was always like, wait a second, but I want balance. And everybody wants to have it all, right? And someone told me something one time that really stuck with me is you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think really what I took away from that is, there's going to be ebbs and flows. I may prioritize my career at one point, especially when you're growing. I feel like when I was at a point where I was really trying to, get from an individual contributor to that first manager role, or when I was a manager but wanted to go from a team that sold smaller SMB type products to an enterprise manager sales role. That was the focus for me then, right? Is how do I grow? How do I, develop my skills so that I can reach that next level? But then I feel like there's times, and I've been through some of these as well, where I've gotten to a point where I am a little more comfortable. I'm never complacent, but I've gotten a little more comfortable in the job I'm doing, maybe the clients I'm working with. I now have relationships with them, and I can maybe sit back a bit and maybe dedicate now time to a family, or time to, for me, I'm very involved in a lot of philanthropic organizations,
Yeah.
and I have taken leadership roles in women's network employee resource groups with my employer, with the junior league, different, usually women focused organizations, whether it's business or whatever. But usually when my work slows down a bit, I'll focus my energy over there. And then when work picks back up, because again, it's cyclical, right? With seasonality, I know when, I guess, to let those balls drop. And another good, I guess, analogy someone told me is it's a juggling act. But you have to know when it's a glass ball that you have to really take care of, make sure you keep it in the air. And when that ball is rubber, and you can let it bounce and it'll come back. And again, an analogy when everybody has to really think about what are the balls that you're juggling, right? I mean, we're all at a point too. Sometimes we're going to have elderly parents to care for. So maybe you're raising
Mhm.
children and have elderly parents and have a household or pets, or a travel role. That we all have different things we're dealing with. I think it's understanding, prioritizing, and knowing that I go back to Sheryl Sandberg was another great book I read when hers came out, about leaning in, knowing when
Yeah.
to lean in and knowing when it's okay to lean back. And I think something I didn't know early on was it's okay to raise your hand and also say, I'm not okay, and I need some time for this, or I want to lean into this but not this. And again, putting aside the whole thing that you have to be everything to everyone all the time, because if you try to do that, you're not going to be there for yourself, and then you're not there for anybody, right, at the end of the day. So
Man, that's really good stuff. Again, I think second all of that, I love the energy management concept because I think
Mhm.
you're right. There is kind of a time and a season for everything, and if you're not taking care of yourself and your battery gets empty, then your business fails and your relationships and everything else, and your health. And then there are times where you need to go hard and you need to push and you need to get to the next level, or take a risk, and you need to either save up energy for that or you need to burn some energy there. And I like what you said about picking stuff up and letting other things go, and having different times and seasons of your life, I think is a great way to think about it. I also sometimes think about it like uh, quests or something, right? I'm going to go get this skill set. So I'm going to do a certification this week to get training certification. And I'm going to go on this little quest. I'm going to spend a lot of energy leveling up my skill set in this one area, but then I get to use that for the rest of my life. And so I'm not
Absolutely.
always going to spend time getting better at public speaking or training, but it's important that I do on a regular basis or from time to time go pick up that skill set. So as
Yep.
we move to the technique bucket, this is an interesting one for me. I don't know how many techniques, tips, tricks, hacks are different for women than for men, but does anything come to mind when I say technique about how you go about business as a woman?
Yeah, so I think again, something, I guess a common theme that I've touched on a couple of times already goes back to the confidence piece. I think that's what I see when I mentor a lot of women, both with my current job, but also just in my, I feel like in the larger community. I've had people that have reached out and said, "Hey, I'm going through this, and could I just kind of, pick your brain?" And a lot of the struggles I think women in particular go through is not feeling the confidence to take that step forward and raise their hand for things, right? So I think it's finding ways to instill that confidence. A lot of that I've found through women's leadership conferences in general. When it comes to leadership, there's a lot of great ones out there. To your point earlier on working from home, I think, 2020 was a challenging year for everyone. That's an understatement, I think. But I did like to look for silver linings and positives that came out of that year. And I think one of those is the availability of virtual workshops. I haven't heard of you don't really hear of conferences these days that don't have that virtual component, and usually at a lesser cost, right? So you can still get that great, rich content of whatever the topic may be, leadership, sales focused. I get several in my inbox a week. So then it becomes, which ones do I want to pick and choose? Or if I purchase one, a lot of times you get the recordings to listen to at your own time. So I think it's, again, to your point, recognizing, so the confidence piece, I'd say is number one. Recognizing your, I think energy management, you coined that term for me perfectly. I think that's the big thing for me too, is really recognizing and staying in tune with myself. I got really big into mindfulness during the pandemic, and
Mm.
led some mindfulness calls at my job virtually, of course. But I think really just staying in tune, how am I feeling it? How is what I'm doing making me feel? And making sure that we were taking care of our mental health. That again was something that was so taboo. And I think we never knew what people were going through behind the scenes. We only see the people nowadays across from the Zoom call or the Teams call or the people we saw in the office, and maybe now again see in the office now that we're back to some type of hybrid environment in some instances. And I try to always go in with the mindset that everyone's doing their best, that no one's just trying to come in and have terrible attitudes and be bad. You never know what people are going through. And so always kind of extending grace. I think women do typically do a good job of that. Maybe it's the caretaker aspect of it, but, giving people grace and giving them the opportunity to come in and feel comfortable having conversations with you, and being honest and being truthful. I think that is where I've noticed some, having success in the sales leadership and sales management area was when I really just kind of had that open door policy with my sales reps. And look, while we, we're all here to work and do a job, we have, in sales, you got a quota to hit. At the end of the day, we also work to live. We don't live to work. And
Yeah.
if we're not, if those two things aren't aligned, and if we're, struggling personally, we're not going to show up our best self professionally. So being able to be just open and honest. And I think having the confidence to do that's number one. But B, I think, just really, again, being truthful and just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. Again, kind of that lean in mentality. Hey, I can lean in right now, but I've got XYZ coming up. I'm gonna have to lean out for a bit professionally, but really just giving people that, as a leader, giving them grace and, knowing if you have that open line of communication, you kind of know where their head's at and how you could best support them. I know Simon Sinek has a lot of good leadership type from a sales aspect, but just leadership in general, and kind of that circle of trust, and that people that they'll follow you, and they will. I mean, I had sales reps that would do anything in the world because they knew I had their back, right?
Yeah.
And I think as a female, that is something that. More so than not, I see female leaders really can exercise that muscle, maybe more easily. Just maybe, and it is, I think, probably the caretaker side of a
Yeah, I
lot of
think you're
how
bringing
they
up something
their
there
family.
interesting for me that I think I would highlight for everybody is one is like find a role model, somebody to look up to, a mentor, somebody that can help you along, but also creating that safe space or protection for other women in business and other people on
Mhm.
your team. And you mentioned the groups. You're a member of several women in business groups. I think support groups are all places that you can go to get help with those techniques, to work through the problems, to deal with issues that come up, along the way. And when you have those support groups and mentors above you and mentees below you that you can look out for, it creates a community where you don't feel as isolated, and that's
Yep.
really important.
Which is important, again, to your point on the work from home, right? Because it's now a little easier not to have that interaction with people, but that human interaction is still critical. So finding some way to do that and engage with other people that probably can relate to you more than you realize, and start having those conversations that can make you realize I'm not alone and someone else gets it.
Once again, we're talking with Holly Hunt. You can find her at hollybhunt.com. And we're talking about women in business for National Women in Business Day here, September 21st. So join the conversation. Leave a comment below. Type in your thoughts. Share this with a woman in business that you think needs to hear it, or inspire some young ladies with this as well. That would be amazing. And Holly, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better before we let you go. So I got 3 quick ones for you. First
Okay.
one is, at this point in your career, how do you define success for yourself?
Success for me, so it's funny, it has changed because I like how you phrased the question at this point in your career. I would have answered this differently probably a decade ago. For me now, at the end of the day, I like to ask myself, what is the legacy I'm leaving behind, and staying true to myself each day. And mine is how can I have an impact on other people? And so each day, if I can say that I did things, or that I'm working on things that are having that lasting impact on people around me, on the world around me, that for me is success. I don't define it by the house I live in, the amount of money in the bank. Those things are great, right? But having the ability to have that impact, if someone else can say, you know what, Holly, you encouraged me to apply for this job and it's changed my life, or you did XYZ for me and it's been, life impacting. That for me is, if I, were to die early, which no one wants to think about, but I felt like, you know what, I've had a successful life. So
Yeah.
that's for me, having an impact.
Now, great answer. On the flip side, what was the biggest lesson learned or hurdle you had to get over in order to be successful?
I'll go back to the confidence piece. I think it was feeling comfortable in my own skin, feeling confident enough that I didn't have to have all the answers. I could still raise my hand and, comment in a conversation where maybe I wasn't the most experienced, the most tenured. I was the only female, but just having the confidence, and getting over the imposter syndrome.
That is awesome. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
So I've dropped a few quote bombs throughout this podcast. I know I love quotes. And if you go on my website, you'll see I'm a big quote person. I think the biggest one for me, though, is attitude. We spoke about that earlier. And Charles Swindoll has a longer quote. I'll just paraphrase the point that sticks with me is life is 90%, or I'm sorry, 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. I've learned growing up that, and growing through my career, that there's a lot of things we cannot control, and that can send you into a very negative tailspin. It can get you in a very bad headspace. But when you really sit down and figure out the pieces you can control, which are your attitude, your behavior, how you're going to wake up the next day and react to things, that for me is key, because again, there's so much we can't control, but the one thing we can control is ourselves. And knowing that gets me through the tough times.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to add here? You've given a whole ton to us for the last half hour. We need to give you at least 30 seconds to tell us about what you have going on. What will people find at hollybhunt.com, and what are you up to?
Sure. No. So first, again, hopefully someone found a nugget or something I said that resonated and maybe sparked some inspiration for you. As I said, that's really my goal, and my definition of success is having an impact on other people. So would love for you guys to follow me, hollybhunt.com. I have been blogging and vlogging. Again, where it comes to the balance piece, sometimes too much time passes before I can get new content out there. So I'm thankful to people like you, Mike, for giving me a platform to share some thoughts and some of my inspiration and motivation. But check out my website. I have some social media pages linked out there as well. But I am starting back up some of my podcasts, and I try to post regularly on my social media platforms, but I'm going to be getting some more vlogs out. I've realized I like the video piece better than the writing. It's a lot quicker for me. So, but whenever I have inspiration, I'll be posting there. So follow me, and would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much again, Holly, for being on the show. hollybhunt.com is the website, links below. And for more information on Sandler, you can go to sandler.com. We have a whole ton of free resources. There are over, I think, 600 other episodes of this podcast you can dive into. Search for your favorite topic or whatever you are struggling with these days. Hopefully we can help you talk through that and think it through. And if you need help with sales or sales leadership, we have local offices, over 200 locations, and an enterprise team if you have more than one location as well. Just go to sandler.com and click the Get Started tab for more information there. As always, whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. We'll see you next time. Good luck and good selling. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.